Om Hiranmaye Parikoshe Virajan Brahmaniskalam Tachu Jam Tachu Brahm Jyotisham Jyoti Tadyadatma Vidto Vidduhu. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. Shining like burnished gold, highest and deepest, the core intelligence of living beings, partless and indivisible, ever pure, free of all taint, the essence of everything which all beings seek, either consciously or unconsciously. There shines Brahman. It is that which the Guru teaches. It is that which the wise ones exult in. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana, Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahano Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karvo Vahai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvisho Vahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, divine reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us. May peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. Then today, Sunday, our usual day of Dharma class, we gather here in these hallowed precincts where last night our puja was enacted in our shrine room right next to us here, and by one of our brahmacharis, and I went in there, felt the beautiful vibration of it before class, and saw the beautiful worship of God with form. God with form is a necessary element, although people may have tired of it because of the dogmas of fallen religion, you might say, religion that has failed to keep itself high-minded and informed with philosophy. Like it is in India, we have the Bhakti Yoga path, which is worship of God with form, always aligned with the Jnana Yoga path, the two wings of the bird, my teacher used to call that, so that the heart, which is moist and wonderful in its penchant to see the Lord existing everywhere and in everything, to deify everything, as Tantra says, is always informed by the third eye, the mind, and vice versa. The mind sometimes can get too sterile and too rational, too practical, even too philosophical maybe, and therefore the heart will check it. So we always have this as one of our ideals. That there are 4 yogas, but those 2 are particularly useful and beneficial for people who are trying to live a spiritual life here in the confines of the world, in the limitations of the body-mind mechanism, and amidst the conditionings and of Maya, the 5-fold Maya, sometimes we call it: name, form, time, space, and causality. So for the Advaitist, or the person who's thinking in a non-dual way, they know that name and form have covered everything, and we'll look at that in terms of the gunas and how they cause rebirth and reincarnation, how one has to transcend the three gunas, master them. Trigunatita, as one of the names of Sri Ramakrishna's direct disciples took that name, Swami Trigunatitananda. He actually taught in San Francisco after Swami Vivekananda had opened the center there, and Vedanta Center. So to go beyond the gunas is going to be a very high requirement for enlightenment. And we'll see why when we look at how the gunas influence our everyday life, and if we're not careful, cause some skaras, impressions to stick in the mind. I always think about snow falling on a wet road, as my teacher would say, that it won't stick there. So you can use that in many different ways, but the best way to use it is that illusion or delusion will not come to the mind if the mind is if the ground of the mind is wet all the time. See, snow can't collect; it just falls and melts. So you use that, and in order to do that, you have to always observe snow conditions, like the Eskimo was the following teaching, because the Eskimos' life depends on watching snow conditions. So for us, that would mean we need to be aware of Brahman at all times in us, and therefore keep this fivefold Maya at bay. There's no doubt that we have to have association with it because name and form are part of its tenets, and time and space flow because of it. That seem to be real because of it. And cause and effect, which we like to call karma in our tradition, is also mounting up and needs to be neutralized, hopefully every day. And you can do that by a combination of study of the wisdom teachings, meditation upon them and upon the Lord, and doing your actions so that snow won't collect in a different way. That is, as a bunch of karma falling on your mind, making snowbanks that you might turn into icebergs, and be very hard to melt over a series of lifetimes. So that practice called sadhana, that is so peculiar, if you will, to Vedanta and Buddhism, and especially Indian traditions, or what we call darshanas, is very important to keep up for the practitioner. To be a practitioner, or if you want to say it in the bhakti yoga language, to be a bhakta, a worshipper of God with form, is very important. So whereas many of the Advaitists had gone beyond the need for outer puja and outer worship, they nevertheless prescribed it for a great amount of the peoples who as yet couldn't understand the I and my Father are one principle, or that thou art. I am that Brahman. There were too many limitations, conditionings, and obstacles in the way of realizing that moment to moment in everyday life. So the practice is necessary. And so you would come down to a more qualified non-dualistic level for that. So we walk into a hallowed atmosphere like this, as I was saying when we started the class, and you know that there's been worship done here with a certain ancient etiquette, if you will, that has followed certain rules and regulations. You're talking about a kind of purification that's been maintained. Purification of location. And they sometimes call that dravya shuddhi, purity of external circumstances. And then you have an atmosphere that's formed by that called kriya shuddhi, and then from that then you can have chit shuddhi. Your mind always feels elevated in a place like that. And in fact, many of the temples in India, Sri Ramakrishna used to say, and Swami Vivekananda, that they didn't feel the sense of holiness in them anymore because people with ordinary minds or even fallen minds had gone there and sort of the vibration hadn't been observed, maybe either by the priesthood or by the people themselves. And it kind of, that feeling of purity got obscured. And it's like the presence of God, decided didn't want to be there anymore. And it's not an imagination kind of thing, as Holy Mother used to say, that if you worship the deity with devotion and with these certain rules and regulations in place, that the deity can manifest itself through the picture. So it can also manifest itself through a temple or church or Kaaba or any holy place where people are very devout and very sincere about their worship. So it's all really the science of vibration, a kind of Shabda Brahma or Nada Brahman kind of path in India. And the musicians follow that too, the artists and so forth. They're used to looking at things in terms of vibration. So if the vibration affects something negatively, then you don't feel that that apparatus or that object is worthy, and it has to be purified by some means, by some act. And that would be the same with the senses then, and then with the emotions, and with even such things as your intelligence. So you would worship accordingly and try and keep that high standard. Keep your awareness on higher things. And you don't just worship it and then walk away from it and forget it and then come back. Then the ritual becomes habitual and ho-hum. As if the deity is there saying, well, your worship isn't very good today, I think I'll go somewhere else. Of course, that deity is within you, and you're bringing that devotion to the deity. That's one of the secrets of worship. So you'll have to maintain a purity of action, kriya, and a purity of chitta, thoughts. And the same then would be very true of then coming in later to that very atmosphere and sitting down and speaking the Dharma, like giving discourses on Dharma like we're doing every Sunday for years on end now, and storing them up on YouTube for everyone to look at, so that each of these classes, you can be very sure, has been given in the atmosphere that's been purified by worship. The two aren't distanced from one another. Philosophy and devotion have never been rendered asunder. In India, they've always been thought of as the same thing, except where narrowness takes over the field. So to bring them together is a great spiritual art and a great aid for the soul. It brings a more complete picture into the other two yogas. So if you have bhakti and jnanam together as two wings of the bird, then what's the tail feathers? You see, that's meditation. It guides, like the rudder of a boat, guides the devotee, see well. And then the body of the bird is karma. So the acts that you do then are done with right orientation, right perspective. We were talking about that with Tadrupa and so forth when yesterday's meeting. See, when we meet together, Guru and Shishya, it's called, meet together and talk about these things, and make it an everyday matter to focus our minds on those things and get that, what my dear friend and the founder of our SRV association said, talked about, is to acquire the insomnia of yoga. See, so that you're ever in an ever awake state. You don't fall out at all or fall over. Because people are sometimes very good at bowing, you see. I've noticed amongst my students, they'll start going like this in meditation. So I know that there's the guna of tamas is getting in, to their meditation. And so I like to think of them, they're just bowing. They're doing the practice of bowing. Doing many pranams per minute, you see. how fast are you going, or maybe how slow are you going in this case? How many pranams per minute can you do, you see? So the achievement of the yoga of insomnia, I saw that in several people in my life, and saw it also as a great ideal, a great ability to attain. So that will have to include mastering the gunas of tamas and rajas. And as far as that goes, if you can get control of tamas and rajas, it's really linked up to controlling your life force or your energy. People, if their life force is controlled, then the objects and activities around them are controlled. If they're not, then it's not often the case. Things break down, you see. So you would much rather not have people handling things when their prana is not under control, because the energy of ineptitude gets into the object, you see, and it'll break down. So you have to master your prana, and one of the things to do with that is to become aware of the three gunas. And if you master the three gunas in any given lifetime, then you're not reborn again. As Krishna says here in one of our favorite quotes on this first chart we want to take up. And let me get out my own collection of these. And in this quote, Sri Krishna in the Gita is talking about specifically this knowledge about the gunas. He says, they who are devoted, have devoted themselves to this knowledge, that's the knowledge of the three gunas, having attained unity with me, are neither born at the time of creation or disturbed at the time of dissolution. So things get born, things live, and things pass. Objects, no different from objects too, they also move into a form, live in a form, and then the form breaks down. So it's the same with those things of Prakriti, nature, and it's the same with beings who are Purusha. But those who are not aware of the higher Purusha, in which Sri Krishna says is my true nature, Brahman, then they go in these rounds of birth and death. And so the series of classes called Reincarnation, Rebirth, and the Illusion of Death. How is it that some people can escape the wheel of birth and death, and others can't? And also, why is it that the ones who do escape the wheel of birth and death are so rare? It might be that they're doing some practice that keeps their mind on the birthless, deathless Atman all the time, rather than on changing matter. If you focus your mind on changing matter all the time and money affairs and various things, then you're building up a habit in the mind of forgetting your true nature and just remembering things that are subject to, well, as Buddha said, the six transformations: birth, growth, disease, old age, decay, and death. Throw hunger and thirst in there if you like, if you're talking about the six transformations. But if you're talking about sadurmi, what Vedanta calls, then birth, growth, disease, old age, decay, and death are the things that happen seemingly to a transmigrating soul. So if we're talking about reincarnation and rebirth, then you can probably assume right away, and we'll look at intelligence soon about that, because those who have intelligence do come to know the Dharma, and then they run a much better chance of gaining enlightenment, moksha, in this lifetime, or maintaining themselves in freedom, or in abidance in the Atman, or Buddha nature, if you'd rather. So in that way you could see how the cycles of birth and death and ignorance, called samsara, under the influence of what's called maya, is a very serious thing to consider for the freedom-loving soul. And right away we would think about beings with their senses seeking, aspiring for heaven. See, so that's going to fall to a lower goal. Not even probably a penultimate goal, because if you aspire for heaven, then you still remember earth. And then when you get to earth, you're still seeking heaven. And so you're making these rounds of birth and death from heaven to earth to hell. And hell, that is, if you've fallen into ignorance so far that you can't even keep your peace of mind or any of your abilities. Sri Sharda Devi used to say, it's possible for a person to be reborn with the credits of his spiritual merit intact. So he can go to a heavenly existence, come back with remembrance, and be in a better condition on earth if he keeps his credits, his merits from actions done and so forth, proper actions, right perspective and right action, right livelihood and so forth. If this art of remembrance is practiced, kept first and foremost on the mind. So in that regard, then, you have these three gunas. That's a teaching particular to Vedanta. You don't find it anywhere else in any religion, and you don't find it taught very much in any other Indian darshana with the focus that you do in Vedanta. Some in yoga, and the other darshanas have sort of borrowed from it. And so you can see how Sri Krishna in very early times, who says in the Gita of all darshanas, I am the author of the Vedanta. So, and Ram says the same thing in his lifetime. He's the master of Vedanta. So we see that this Vedanta is a very, very long-lived, even back to the Vedic period of the rishis, and that teachings of the gunas are found in those scriptures like the Gita. So that's a very powerful statement there. One of my favorite statements is that those who have devoted themselves to the knowledge of the three gunas, they're neither born at the time of creation, nor are they disturbed at the time of destruction. That is, destruction means not a destruction back to nothing, but a dissolution back into the source. The source here is seeds. Nature comes from seeds, and bodies come from seeds. Forests come from seeds. Everywhere you look has to do with bijams. But if you say the word bijam in Sanskrit, you're looking at a very powerful seed that is able to manifest names, worlds of name and form in time and space. And of course, that very teaching, even though it's a description of Maya, is very powerful and very revolutionary to the mind to even consider. Most people wouldn't even consider it. If Maya is everywhere, and people are going about with it without knowing it, Sri Ramakrishna said that's sort of like the fish sunk in the mud, thinking it's safe from the fisherman, but he's got the fisherman's net in its mouth. See? So in that way, he described how people are not aware of Maya. The minute you become aware of Maya and its deluding effects and its dangerous influences, then you can step back from it, and it gives you a whole different look at your life, and actually an ability to separate the wheat from the chaff, or the real from the unreal, or the essential from the non-essential, and in other ways in which it's been said. And then Buddha says, like a bird set free from a net, from the fowler's net, it can soar high in the sky of awareness. So they use very poetic ways of describing these things, and Vedanta is particularly known for that. You'll have some very deep, profound, even maybe abstruse sayings that'll make you think about things, and then all of a sudden there'll be this beautiful devotional element thrown into it, poetic. Like you're going along hearing about the non-dual Brahma, and all of a sudden some sloka appears in front of you and says, I am the parrot, green parrot with red eyes. I am the athletic youth and the old man tottering along on the staff. So all of a sudden you have this close association with Brahman as the underlying substratum, they say, of everything here. But it's going to take that mind that's pure, and the senses that are pure, and the body that's pure to go along with it, in order to have this revelation. And revelation happens really about the level of sattva. Because if you go beyond sattva to what Shankara calls pure sattva, then you're in the realm of Divine Mother herself. You're like one of her children. And that's beyond revelation, because revelation can come and go, as we know. And revelation doesn't necessarily transform the soul. It can, if the soul is more subtle and more qualified. But usually revelation comes to quite a few people, like spiritual experiences, but it doesn't really transform them into a knower of Brahman or a lover of divine reality. Again, using terms that correlate to both bhakti and jnanam, devotional path and wisdom path. So when you become a child of the mother, like in present times, Sri Sharada Devi is our Ishtam, and Sri Ramakrishna, the Kali Yuga avatar they call him, then you are already a fuser of paths. You see, you're looking to bring together the four yogas in a very rich amalgam that can set you free. It's like nothing can resist that kind of practice. And so you try and perfect yourself on all levels, on all four sides. And you might say that you can find then the three gunas present as obstacles and aids in all the four yogas. If you were trying to meditate and you watched your mind for 10 or 15 minutes, then you'd probably know how the mind got very restless, and then it got sleepy and began to fall into tamas, and then all of a sudden it got balanced. I used to laugh and say, if you're watching a regal, beautiful Irish setter, you see a dog sitting in the sunshine, very noble, see, it's got a sattvic mood on it, then all of a sudden it's very restless running around. The terror of every fire hydrant in the neighborhood, as they say, you see. Or other time you see it just laying on the ground, lolling with its tongue out and flies all over its tongue, totally in a tamasic mood. That same animal has gone through the three gunas inside of maybe an hour. So if you're meditating, then you'll notice the three gunas running through you in any given, maybe even in a minute, if you watch the snow conditions of your mind close enough. And the advantage of that is that, oh, the three gunas exist. Oh, it's a teaching. Oh, with them I can now separate myself from them. And I can get to a balanced state and hold a balanced state. We'll look at that closer when we look at Shankara's version. Right now, looking at Krishna's version of that, because it applies most to our subject, reincarnation and rebirth, that first quote is important. They're neither born at the time of creation, nor disturbed at the time of dissolution. So how can you live but not be born? Is an interesting question that would come along. How do they live free of the body when they're in a body? Basically by not identifying with the body and by never believing that they ever were a body. Some of them don't even think they have a body. The body, like Vivekananda used to, somebody saw him pacing once and then looking in the mirror at himself and then pacing and looking in a mirror, and the person that was looking on, who was American at the time, oh no, there's vanity even in Vivekananda, he thought. And as soon as that thought occurred to that person's mind, Swamiji turned to him and said, you know, I can't remember what I look like. So, you know, I look at my mirror and I walk away and I forget right away. So he just had no attachment to the body whatsoever. And there are people that we know of, like Sri Ramakrishna, his master, who had even less attachment to the body. Saw a picture of himself once and didn't recognize who it was. Looked in a river once, you know, and looked away and couldn't remember his own visage. And so very, very divorced from the body. And the Koli Mother used to say, what's all this fuss about the body? It's just a few pounds of ash in the end. So forget your personality and your body. Remember your true nature. This is how she would speak to you if you were inquiring of higher truth with her. If you had the great boon of sitting in front of the Divine Mother of the Universe in a human form in the present age. See? So that's how you're not born at the time of creation, because you're not the body. And they become so sure of this that the body can come and go, as Sri Krishna says, children outgrowing pairs of clothes and throwing the clothes away or passing them on. And they just remain in the present moment as the unborn Atman. That happens through the practice of consciousness, through the examination of snow. And it has to be held in the mind every day. They try and get you to do that. Oh, please meditate and do your mantra, once a day. You see. For the Americans, you see, it's a little bit unrealistic to think that they can study all the dharmic systems and do all the pujas that are in the scriptures and so forth, you see. Where's the time for that, and where's the inclination towards it? Where's even the samskara for it in us? So what are we going to do? We better give them the mantra, because if they come to know the mantra and they connect it with the word Om, and they connect those two with the Ishtam, that is, if they have an Ishtam, Shiva, Krishna, Ramakrishna, Divine Mother, then this can all be paid forward very swiftly, maybe even in a matter of one lifetime, maybe even a few months, depending on how close to the surface the gold of your Buddha nature or your Atman is, so that you have less pebbles to brush away, Sri Ramakrishna said. And the gold is right there near the surface, shining. That gold is intelligence, and we'll look at that. Also could say pure bhakti is that gold. These are golds without dross. They've been purified, they've been heated, like gold heated over the fire. All the dross been removed from it, made into beautiful ingots and gold ornaments and so forth that are pure. So the first quote alone is very salutary saying, and we should consider that not only as a way to look beyond the illusion of death, because basically there's the third part of our series title, Reincarnation, Rebirth, and the Illusion of Death. So I had a young Mexican boy talk to me recently, who's having a lot of trouble with death, fear of death. What if my mother dies? What if I die? What if my girlfriend dies? What if my brothers die? See, and evidently his mother told me he's walking around all day thinking about death. Well, you're thinking about it in the wrong way, I told him. You're spending too much time thinking about death when you should be thinking about divine life. I told him, don't you know that the teachings say that death is rather a predestined thing? That everyone has pre-chosen the time of their death before they got in the body. You see, oh, I will die this way due to this condition, you see. And you almost see that in people. Oh, I knew it, I got cancer, I knew it was coming. You'll hear people say this kind of thing, as if they uploaded that into their computer before they took a mind and a body and appeared on earth with parents. Now you'll see some people who's even died before they die from the body. So if you can die before you die, then can't you not be born before you're born? So there's this unborn principle that's in everything. And so tongue-in-cheek we give the title to our class series, Rebirth, Reincarnation, and the Illusion of Death. The illusion of death will kind of put the exclamation point on the fact that rebirth and reincarnation is a relative law only. It's not an absolute law. Because the only absolute is your unborn, undying nature. Atman. We are Atman, all-abiding. So if you sit around and think about that all the minutes and hours of the day, then what do you expect? That you'll pretty soon realize your blissful nature and live in it. See, there would be no other way to live than that. It wouldn't be acceptable to think any other way. Let the body come and go. See. but you, O mind, remain focused on the feet of the Divine Mother of the universe. That's a beautiful song in India. Let the body come and go as it will, but you, O mind, be focused on the feet of the Divine Mother of the universe. Because from her I have received a command that death must die. The song goes on like that in an ingenious way. I think I've said enough about that, but it just goes to show you that one sloka from the Gita, you could go on talking about it all day with its connections. And you should. I mean, talking about it or thinking about it. Talking about it with your friends, family, and those of like mind, and thinking about it in your own mind. Like Shankara always says, I think it's even on one of these charts. I've told you now what the difference between you and the unreal is. Now think about it in your mind and make your decision. See, don't stay on the fence. One of my students recently told me, when you speak like that about not staying on the fence, it reminds me of one of Christ's sayings. When Christ evidently said something like, and I'm paraphrasing, I don't want you lukewarm. If you're lukewarm, I'll spit you out. I want you either hot or cold. So either you're hot to accept the teachings of an avatar like Jesus, and you will follow and commit, or you don't want it at all. And you'll go back to the world and find your way. But he doesn't want you lukewarm, somewhere caught on the fence. It's as if that's almost a worse trap than making your decision on one side or the other. So people can go on for lifetimes in a state of indeterminacy. And I've seen that and called that one of the problems of today's age with people who are entering into spiritual practice. Indeterminacy is one of those. They cannot make up their mind to go full into it or quit it. And so they remain on the fence. And you know the saying, the fence is greener on the other side and so forth, but you never actually go to prove it for yourself. And the teaching about it is if you do jump off on the wrong side, you quickly find out that you have jumped off on the wrong side. And anyone with intelligence then will be able to make the right decision. So either way you cut it, it's best not to go lukewarm. I thought that was a very beautiful teaching, and I had never heard it out of the Bible. Well, now you see on this chart as we get into this, and I've re-explained it from last week, because you remember last week we had the beautiful chart, 4 of them, beautiful charts on rebirth and reincarnation. Here you see these 3 long ovals, and basically those are Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, the 3 gunas, with a nice village scene behind with one of the divine couples and so forth. And you see that these 3 gunas are running through the warp and woof of everything, as they say. To recognize them and to withdraw from them is really a penultimate goal. Trigunatita. You want to get beyond even balance, because you can reach a balance and it's kind of a high pleasure. It's kind of a lasting pleasure that you get used to, but it's not the bliss, ananda, of pure conscious awareness, moksha, which you can have and then escape all 3 gunas. You can be beyond the 3 gunas. So the 3 gunas out of which even the body is made, he says in the Gita. So look up and down the right-hand side of the or for you, the left-hand side of the chart there. You can see Sattva guna, Rajoguna, and Tamoguna listed there. And in the Gita he says, on the other side of the oval, those fixed in Sattva rise, those fixed in Rajas revolve, and those fixed in Tamas fall. So the fall is into Tamasi Mudya Yonishu Loka. Loka means a world, Yoni means a womb. So they fall into a diluted Mudya womb, those who live in Tamas. Darkness, brooding, heaviness. And let's say drugs and alcohol weren't even in the picture. We wish. See, at least not addiction to them. So if those weren't in the picture, which they weren't so much in earlier times, you see, then people would still have this darkness of tamas visiting them. I remember when those weren't considerations in my younger days in grade school and high school, that the parents of people who had children that were really heavy and suicidal and so forth didn't have those things to blame, and they didn't have a pill to take to get them over it, like attention deficit and all that kind of stuff. This is before they started figuring out these so-called cures for these things. But to us, the cause is a samskara in the child's mind. That is, because of past lifetimes, they had lived in a tamasic state, so they brought it back into this lifetime. And then the parents should be able to look at it and say, well, we need to get you active. So out of tamas, they would try and get you into some action. And that's not an ultimate solution, because tamas will affect action and make it, it will color it. You see, the actions will be, well, let's say, again, drugs and alcohol and those kinds of things out of the picture. That action will become selfish. And your parents are selfish. The society that's teaching you to gain things, objects and wealth, is selfish. The whole thing is done in selfishness. Selfishness meaning it's all run by the ego. Oh, when will the intellect take over and the ego step aside? There's one song, you see. When will intelligence take over and the ego step away? When will this, we'll see that soon, how your flint-like intelligence, when will that get command of the whole situation? And the ego will have to step aside and not be the usurper on the throne anymore. In other words, your ego will get diminished, or, as we say in our tradition, ripened, apakvahamkara. And in the meantime, it's unripe. It's running the show. I was in a health food store the other day and walking along, and on the shelf I saw it's a bunch of stickers. And the first one my eyes fell on is, "She runs the show." So I wonder, well, that's true. I believe that, you see. Because I'm a devotee of the Divine Mother, so that appeals to me, but let's see what they mean by it. So I turned it over, and it was a sticker about Pele. She's our Hawaiian goddess, by the way, if you haven't heard of her live streaming audiences. And those who will see these classes in the future. It means something like, the word in it in Hawaiian is pohaku, it's rocks. So she actually forms rocks. You see, she forms islands, she forms rocks. She's like Dravya Shakti in the Hindu tradition. She's a producer of substances. So she runs the show. She provides the land that you walk on and the waters that cool the land when it's hot, and so forth and so on. So I actually bought one of those stickers, and I like to hold it up there, you see, and keep it on my desk. She runs the show. See that anywhere you go, this divine Shakti, we call her, Divine Mother of the Universe, is there as the animating power in all things. Also there as the memory of all divine things, as sometimes we like to sing. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Chetaneti Abhidiyate Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Vishnu Mayati Shabdgita Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Smriti Rupena Samstita Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Namo Namaha. O Divine Mother of the Universe, you exist in the hearts and minds of all beings as intelligence, as memory, as compassion, as love, and so forth. All the divine virtues are there in her. And she exists in a formless sense in the hearts and minds of all beings. Sometimes throughout my 50 years of sadhana in this lifetime, since I was 20, now I'm almost 70, throughout my 50 years I thought, When will I get a vision of Divine Mother? See? And then the answer comes to me, what a fool. See? She doesn't have a form, how can you have a vision of her? She's animating your arms right now. She's pumping your lungs. She's the food you eat. She's the energy you get from food. She's coursing through the hundreds and thousands of nadis that run through your gross body and your subtle body. And she just caused you to have the thought, when will I get a vision of you? In other words, one of our favorite mantras from the song, right? Oh Mother, when will I see how you see? In meditation. I know what you see in your meditation. When will I see how you see in meditation? So what we're talking about here is a higher power of revelation, sattva. Now we went a little, as we look at beings who fall into a lower circle of samsara, in deluded wombs, he says in the Gita, this is Sri Krishna's words, then we see that that has to do with indolence, slothfulness, and its causes attachment to ignorance and attachment to sleep. So that deluded kind of sleep, like the Irish setter laying on the ground, completely gone, and not gone in a good way, lolling about in tamas. That's what sometimes you can find in lazy children and your own lazy, procrastinating mind. Now that when that gets mixed then with, and he says tamas is a matter of descension, you see, and over here, tamas is a kind of stagnation, just staying in one cycle. He says they're born in the wombs of restless people. So that next entry there is karma sangishu loka. Loka means a realm, so it's not a world that's somehow alien outside of yourself, like up in space or back in time or something, or another dimension. It's actually a world of thought. You see, how you think is how your world is. So if you're talking about karma sangishu loka, you're talking about the tainted worlds of those who have attachment to restlessness. And we can see that probably more prevalent in our society today, that activity is taking over most of our life, and the opposite to that is inaction, and we consider that to be sleep. So there you are, you see. You either have active life in rajas or you have a tamasic life in sleep. And so you're not being taught, nor are you yet finding out necessarily until you find a teacher and a path and a practice, that there's a different kind of inactivity that the seers are in possession of and that they want you to attain. And that would be sattva, and we'll get to the teaching of higher sattva too, because that's an addition of Shankara to the three gunas. So you can see here the tainted worlds of those attached to action. So basically, he says in the Gita, the result of rajas is pain. So not all-consuming pain that you might feel in a depressed state, you see, but the pain of getting and losing. The pain of having and not having, the pain of brooding on something you want and not getting it. All the dualities are there and in play when you're in a restless state. So that's a kind of pain that vexes the soul. And if the soul is seeking for higher things, it begins to become world weary. You say, oh, I see how the world is now. I think I'll take a step back. And right when that thought occurs, sattva is poised, you see, to enter into the mindset. And that is called there the Uttamavidam Amalam Loka. Mala is imperfection, so Amala means it's void of imperfection. It's pure. It doesn't have malas or imperfections in it. You're not aware of them at that time. Viddham, of course, is knowledge. So you've got that balanced knowledge that has hasn't actually removed the imperfections from the mind, if that's really possible, but it's removed your consciousness from thinking about the imperfections of the mind. And now you can be in a sattvic state. You can see how that might not be the highest state, because you could fall back into thinking about the imperfections of the mind as soon as you fell back into rajas. Pain. Right? Oh, I'm not so perfect after all. Oh, I'm not so balanced. I've got these imbalances now. And so forth and so on. I was in a state of peace, now I'm in a state of restlessness. So this is the cycle, or the circuit of the three gunas that are going around constantly in any given minute, in any given hour, in any given meditation, in any given lifetime, and sometimes over a series of lifetimes. I've seen people and talked to people and coached people, trained people of all kinds in the West over these 50 years, and I've noticed that some of them have long cycles of depression. Their minds are in a dark place for months, maybe years, and then they'll shift to a more rest. They'll get active, you see, and then they'll have a lot of work going on. So they're not as plagued by tamas anymore. They're not in Mr. Thomas's neighborhood. They moved to Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. The things are a little better for them. But that restlessness also has a shelf life, and depending on what they learned during their period of action, they can fall back in to tamas, or they can rise. And he says there, it's ascension as compared to stagnation, as compared to descension. So what's the predication for that? What's the provocation for it? Is that a person who all of a sudden sees that action is in inaction, and inaction is in action, they truly know, so they go to sattva. But if they all of a sudden think that this life is futile, this actions I'm doing are futile, they're not getting me anywhere, and they become disillusioned with life, then they can fall back into tamas. Now, if they have a teacher and a path during that period of higher rajas, because this is a threefold division, but you'd have to say black and brown are here. You see, dark red and red, pink and white, and then colorless. You see, it's the way they kind of color tone these gunas. That it's just all black and all red and all white, but there can be black and brown. You see, so if you're in rajas and you've reached the, as Vivekananda actually used this about the Americans, they're pink, he said. And I don't know if that was prophetic, what city he was in when he said that, but basically he knew that they were getting out of rajas and had a chance to get into sattva. Because if the society gets affluent and begins to have pleasure that lasts for a long time, that's a kind of sattva. That's also a kind of trap for an affluent society, because it begins to sap it of its vital energy. You see, there's some good things about rajas. It does give you a definite energy, and you can refine that energy through your food, through your breathing processes, and through your study of scriptures, and through your meditation. We'll look at that next. And that means that vibration that's in you, is that prana is getting purified. And with that purified prana, then, as we said last week in that chart, if you remember, about the Puryastika body, Lord Vashishta told Ram, when these elements of the eightfold body are purified, Kundalini loves to sport through it. Kundalini Shakti loves to rise and sport through it. So she'll take you up and beyond the gunas, see, to revelation, to clear sight, to clear seeing, darshan. What else here is on this chart that we might not have seen? Well, if you're studying that sattva guna with its powers of ascension, then basically Whereas tamas was indolence and slothfulness, and rajas was pain and restlessness. When you get to sattva, you feel luminous and you feel pure. And nobody can tell you otherwise. Not your worst enemy, not your parents, not religion. You see, you're just sort of impervious to all those things. Well, I just feel balanced. I don't really care what you think. See, so you're in a natural state of being close to your Atman, sort of like deep sleep. You know, who's got a problem with deep sleep? See, it's just everything has been taken away there, and what's that called? Emptiness. See, it's emptiness. You think shunyata, Buddhist emptiness, is just some void somewhere? It's that everything negative has been stripped away. You don't have any more conditionings and limitations impeding you anymore. You're in a natural state. And you want to attain that in meditation. So if you have an hour's meditation that's all sattvic, you feel very good about that. Be careful though, because attachment to son of bliss is one of the 4 obstacles to meditation. That's a teaching by Patanjali, the father of yoga. You have sleep, restlessness, you have attachment and aversion, don't you, as the other 2, and then you have attachment to bliss. Doesn't that sound like the 3 gunas to you? So, father of yoga, aware of that, putting it in his own language. So in sattva you're going to get the attainment of knowledge, sort of an attachment to knowledge, and attachment also to happiness. And it's preferable to your rajasic and tamasic levels. So this is kind of an overview of the 3 gunas right out of the Bhagavad Gita, with this quote starting it off. They're not disturbed at the time of death, dissolution. They're not born at the time of a cosmic cycle. Remember, in India, time is cyclic and it's unending. That is, it's eternal, but at the same time it's illusory. So these are things you have to ponder, higher dualities, time and timelessness, form and formlessness, that the soul wants to ponder. You see, if time disappeared, then it must not be eternal like Brahman, you see. And it went away in my deep sleep state and so forth. But when I look at time and cycles, somebody's telling me that it's got a shelf life of so many billion years. But when that's over, then another cycle just comes back of time, and you find yourself on the wheel again of rebirth and re-death. Rebirth and re-death. I was thinking that was a good word to add to the whole thing. Re-death, why not? You see. Well, of course, at the back of this teaching, it all comes out of the seed-giving father, Brahman or Ishvara. And out of the womb of the seed-giving father, Krishna says, that's, of course, Mahat or Ishvara. That's his highest nature and form. And then, of course, his true nature is Brahman, the formless essence of things. Beings seek the Lord with form or beyond form according to their temperaments and their predilections. The only other thing here to say is this quote at the bottom of the chart. When the seer sees no other agent than the gunas, he enters into my being, Sri Krishna says. Having crossed over these 3 gunas, out of which the body is evolved, he is freed from birth, death, decay, and pain, and attains to eternal life. Samadhi. So that's why he's neither born at the time of creation or disturbed at the time of dissolution. Those are all processes in time and space with name and form, and he's a nameless, formless, timeless, spaceless Atman. He's come to know that with an assurance based upon study of the scriptures, Atmic inquiry with his guru, meditation and gaining his or her own direct experience, practice of the 4 yogas, if you will, and serving all beings selflessly. So a not so quick but fairly thorough run through Sri Krishna's look at the 3 gunas in accord with that statement about rebirth and reincarnation and the illusion of death. Let's move over then in the time remaining in the first half to see what Shankara, some several thousands of years later, has done with the gunas in India at the time, say around 700 AD or so, because Shankara's teacher was Govindapada, who is the father of yoga 600 years prior to that in his rebirth. So he's being reborn and not being disturbed, isn't he? And he escaped destruction and was reborn as Govindapada's, as Gaudapada's student. So that whole line of Gaudapada, Govindapada, and Shankara from around 600 AD to around late 700 AD is a three-lifetime scenario of Advaitas or non-dualists who are also devotees of Shiva and who are also Samayachara tantricists. So they also followed worship of Shiva and deity and Mother, Divine Mother. They wrote hymns and wrote scriptures on Divine Mother too. So they had it in spades, you might say. So if you see this chart, then it's been this way without an image for ever since I created it years ago. And so last week I was thinking, what could I use for an image behind the three gunas for Shankar's version? I thought, how about fencers, sword fencing? And so I found this image basically that was one master fencer and the three other fencers, three other swordsmen coming up against him. Those are the three gunas. And we can see how he has to masterfully pit himself against them and conquer them, dispatch them. Not just indolence, not just restlessness, but balance too has to go. That is attachment to balance. So that's how high the bar is for the Vedantic aspirant seeking higher samadhi, or even non-dual samadhi, is that it's going to have to be a matter of caution that you reach happiness, as affluent societies do, for instance, and don't move from there. You know, you might say it's a kind of revolution borrowed from tamas onto sattva, that you just stay revolving in sattva all the time, the heaven-aspiring senses. And you're born with people of that kind too. So you haven't escaped the wheel of birth and death, you're just on the upper gear of it. So if you get beyond the three worlds then, and into the fourth chakra, as we might say here, then you become a true lover of God. Look into Sri Ramakrishna's life if you want to know what that really looks like in this day and age. A person who undoubtedly and perfectly loved God first and foremost with all his heart, all his soul, and all his mind, and so forth. I find that to be a wonderful study. So Shankara here gives us this doorway out of sattva. That's one of the beautiful teachings about this in the Viveka Chudamani. The Viveka Chudamani is one of the 14 or 15, I think, scriptures that he actually penned. And in his day and time, 700 AD, they did have parchment and ink and so forth. So he was able to actually write down a lot of these teachings of Vedanta, of Advaita Vedanta, and like I said, some of even the scriptures. And he did a thorough study of the Upanishads and commented on 11 of the 108 of them. They're now definitive commentaries on the Upanishads. Became what we think of as Vedanta in this day and time. So his importance can't be underestimated for Vedanta in this day and age. But of course, very monastic. They were of a monastic order of Shaivites, worshippers of Lord Shiva. And worshippers of Lord Shiva should know that death is an illusion, that Yama, the Lord of Death, follows the dictates of Lord Shiva, who is a much higher god. So in the Viveka Chudamani, Viveka, discrimination between the real and the unreal, the wheat and the chaff. Chudamani, the difference between, you see. You know the difference between what's essential and what's non-essential. That is, between the soul, with a capital S, and nature. Between God and mammon. You could find this anywhere in the stretches of thousands of years. Great teachers have pointed this out as being one of the earmarks of a person who's aspiring to get to sattva and beyond. So it's in the Vivekachudamani then, he does actually give us a doorway out of the third guna, and he describes what that is, what that's like. In fact then, because I usually take this from bottom up, let's start with the good news. It's like here we were starting with Brahman, and then the seed-giving father, he called it in the Gita. In the Vivekachudamani, slokas 108 through 121, if you want to run to that scripture after class, eagerly, look it up and say, oh, there it is, and see how Shankara put it, and see the wonderful translation that Swami Turyananda or any other of the Swamis of the Ramakrishna order, there's been a couple versions of the Vivekachudamani that have been put out by the Ramakrishna order into great English. So, in another reference, Shankar has said everything from avyaktam all the way down to the element earth is the non-self. So with avyaktam we don't really have any teaching like that in Western or westernized religions. It's only in India that you go and find a word like that and a teaching about it. It's the undifferentiated. It's like everything in seed form. Which, if you don't know that, you begin to believe that things are born and that they die. And when you believe they are, then many lifetimes lived in the idea that there's birth and death turns you into a believer of birth and death. This is just straight from the mouth of Sri Ramakrishna. So those beings who did not believe in birth and death, or in evolutionary cycles that only had a certain time and ended, or that they were any body that occurred in the evolutionary process, those are called ajativadins. They know that there was no creation ever, and that there was no birth for them, and that the body was born out of the mind. The mind fashioned the bodies, and that divine reality had nothing to do with this creative process. It was all a mental projection by billions of beings, some of them very high beings, like Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Should we sing it? Because we haven't for a while. Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Deva Maheshwara, Gurur Eva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So, the Guru is Brahma, the Guru is Vishnu, the Guru is Shiva. That is the power of creation, preservation, and destruction. Hold it. I don't think I'll use that definition anymore. I think I'll use projection, sustenance, and withdrawal. Because nothing's ever created, and it's never destroyed. And that's the highest teaching of the Advaita Vedanta. And the realization of the illumined seer, what to speak of an avatar and so forth, an Amsa avatar in Shankar's case, who wrote scriptures. So since that's the case, I think I'll instead say it as it is. All the worlds of name and form and time and space got projected by the mind and Maya. And Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva happen to be the first great projectors, you see. Their powers, and actually they're inside of you, their powers, great deities that oversee that process over hundreds and thousands of years of time and cycles, repeated ad infinitum. That's the Hindu look at time and space. We've seen those charts before, I've shown them. And how unending it is, it just seems like there's an end because there's a long pralaya or maha pralaya where there's no name and no form. It's like the deep sleep of the Trinity. I think we'll turn this off for a while and get a really big good night's sleep. You see, but that night's going to be like 4,320,000,000 years long. And then we'll come back again and it'll all project again. And this is an ongoing thing, because what else do you expect from something eternal? If you call divine reality eternal, then you're going to put an end to it somewhere? A definitive end? How can you do that to something that's timeless, boundless, deathless, eternal, or any other words that you want to look for in the English language? because you're not going to find words like avyaktam there. See? So what's undifferentiated, that's the seeds in unmanifested prakriti and in the mind in deep sleep. See? So out of avyaktam, the gunas come. You see how close to the hub of this great projection the gunas are. It'll be the first thing that you'll, because remember here he said out of the body, all the bodies are formulated out of the gunas too, and these realms. So if that's the first thing you encounter when you come out of the undifferentiated and with your seeds create some bodies and worlds, it's going to be the last thing that you're going to get over when you leave the worlds and bodies behind. And you practice that every night, you see. Vivekananda said, the minute you're born, you're rushing towards death. That was one of his famous statements. And people would go, really? Yes, but no, you're never going to be disturbed at the time of death if you devote yourselves to that knowledge about the three gunas. So let's get busy. Let's become birthless, deathless, because that's who we are. We have to start thinking that way all the time. We have to keep it in mind, because you'd be surprised how quickly the overlays of society, upbringing, military, politics, the eternal money making can make you forget that, or make you de-emphasize it. And I think there's a lot of people who are very busy with their lives now, and somewhere inside them they're keeping this dharmic knowledge, you see. But how often are they going to refer to it? And when Yama lowers the curtain and death to the body happens, how conscious are they going to be of it? Because remember, Sri Krishna in the Gita says, what you think of at the time of your death, you think about at the time of your death, that's pretty much what you're going to come back. Like King Bharata had a pet deer, you see. And when he passed his life, his last thoughts was about his pet deer, so he was reborn as a deer. That's a story in the Itihasa of India. Well, it doesn't have to be that way, but if you're not careful, you see. So, are you going to love matter, or are you going to love the Lord, Mammon or God? Or are you going to be indeterminate on the fence somewhere? You should probably cast the die, you see, once and for all, and get on that sense of divine reality, that side of the fence, and affirm for yourself. After you affirm, then make sure you confirm. See? There's actually 9 steps to that process. We have a chart on that. So, how did avyaktam get defined by great beings? The three gunas are in equilibrium. Great, but equilibrium doesn't last, you see, all the time. There's a shock, you see, that happens where everything falls into disequilibrium, you see. And that's when beings start, that's when the creation process starts. Because there can be no projection or creation going on if the gunas aren't involved. Tamas, Rajas, and Sattva are in everything. They're like sweeping through everything. And you might as well call Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva that, Tamas, Rajas, and Sattva, in a very high sense. So you can equate them to, I mean, you'd probably change the order a little bit. Brahma would probably be Rajas, Vishnu would be Sattva, and Shiva would be Tamas. A horrible Tamas that wipes everything away at the end of a creation. So you're just seeing different forms of them. Whether you look at them anthropomorphically as gods and deities, or you look at them as principles of philosophy, makes no never mind. You should probably look at them as both. But if you do look at them as forms, you should look at them as forms inside of yourself, the self, the great self, Atman, Brahman, Purusha, which is beyond the undifferentiated. But anything from the undifferentiated on down is going to fall into the control of the three gunas. That's why it says here, they're in equilibrium to start out before this cosmic process goes. And when as soon as it kicks in with the first thought of Lord Brahma, thinking of the first seed, then, well, let's quote Sherlock Holmes, the game's afoot. See? And it's a long, long game. It's a chess game of many moves. And how are beings faring? Are they winning the game and getting out, victors? Or are they sucked back into the game again and again due to their attachments and their desires? Also it says here, they're the cause of the gross and subtle bodies. If you looked at Shankar's teachings, you'll find out that he's taken the 24 cosmic principles of Samkhya and broken them up into 3 bodies. One's called the gross body, that's all this external that you're dealing with. The subtle body is everything internal, and the causal body is everything in seed form, if you want to put it as simply as possible. So the gunas, all those bodies, subtle and gross bodies, are fashioned out of the disequilibrium of the gunas when it breaks forth. Because Brahman has nothing to do with moods. It has nothing to do with modes. So this is part and parcel, maybe even crucial essence of reincarnation and rebirth, leading to the realization of the illusion of death. This is really what we're talking about when we talk about reincarnation. Say, oh, I think I don't want to be reborn again. But who tells you? Well, you've heard of the 3 gunas, here's what you're going to have to do to not be reborn again. It's not just a matter of, well, I found out, I didn't want to be born again with my parents, you see. I didn't want to have to go through all of those things again, like taking a body, learning to speak, growing, getting a job, going to school, which I hated all the way up to the time until I got to college when they let me more free, you see. So all those things you have to do over again on knowledge that you already know. What part of it am I going to bring forth this time? It's called sanchitta karma or prarabdha karma into manifestation, and how am I going to have to deal with it, or can I deal with it? Can I neutralize it? Shall I get busy and start neutralizing it right now? You see. Well, then the gunas are going to be involved in this, and you're not going to find that teaching anywhere but in Vedanta. You can't find it in another religion. They have other ways maybe of explaining it, but this is a direct hands-on way philosophically of seeing it with your third eye open, with your intelligence, and engaging in some tools, which we'll see here, that will dispel them for all times. You will not enjoy the equilibrium of the gunas, nor will you suffer the disequilibrium of the gunas. Born at the time of death, not disturbed at the time of death, and born at the time of creation. You'll transcend the 3 gunas. Trigunatita, atita, you get beyond them. So it's not a matter of courting them and playing with them unless you want to take on bodies again, especially subtle and gross bodies. The other description there is, and these are very hard to find about undifferentiated, what it means, avyaktam. Intellect remains in deep sleep. In other words, it has no vibration. When beings start thinking, then the worlds effloresce. When they stop thinking, they go away. Don't they? At least for the individual. Well, I'm waking up, I'm thinking, everything's going on, I'm sleeping, I drew it all back in, it's gone. So you might have a problem with that philosophically on an ultimate level, but you cannot deny it on a personal level. It's going away for you in deep sleep, it's coming back and waking. And in between those two, you're dreaming about it. It's like brooding upon it. And so you see, there's the 3 gunas again. You want to try and keep the intellect from vibrating. What's that called? If you go beyond deep sleep anyway. Meditation. Meditation is where, whether people know it or not, there are 2 things that they're trying for in meditation. They're either trying to see the face of God, look upon divine reality with their own eyes, or one eye, or they're trying to accomplish this great feat of getting over the gunas. That is, stopping vibration from happening. But it doesn't happen consciously in deep sleep. It happens unconsciously. So it's why I started out chanting today. That one Brahman, you see, Hairan Mai Pare Koshe, all beings seek it consciously or unconsciously. So if you're going into deep sleep every night, it's like you're saying to yourself, I think I'll go see the seed-giving Father. But then I may see him and I might wake up and totally have forgotten him as the three gunas came flowing back into my life. I wake up, I've got something to do. I wake something up, or I say, I got something to do, but I don't want to do it. See? That's Rajas and Tamas at the fore again. See? So to master all three of them is the ideal. Let's see, before our break, which is just a few minutes. Now, I must admit that I changed this chart just a little bit this week. I put in a protective net of sadhana right there at pure sattva, because that's what we teach in Vedanta. It's the cutting edge. You have two words for it, dharma and sadhana. You do spiritual discipline if you want to separate the wheat from the chaff, if you want to cut yourself off from the ordinary run of minds that are suffering, these gunas. Because who wants to suffer happiness? See, the monks certainly don't. I've met enough of them to know that. It sickens them to think about a happy society. Vivekananda made because he knows they're just sleeping in some sort of a dream of false happiness. That's why Swamiji said, don't talk to me about a good world. There's no such thing as a good world. That's like saying hot ice. So you want free, and the only way you're going to get free is to go beyond your attachment to happiness or heaven-seeking senses. That's how the Ishavasya Upanishad puts it right up the top in the first chapter. They go from birth to death, they go heaven-aspiring senses, take them to the realm of the gods, and then take them back to the realms of rebirth again. Doesn't it sound like you're in a revolution there, in a cycle? That heaven too is a part of that cycle? And so my teacher Swami Sheshanandaji Maharaj, peace and bliss be upon him, used to say that. We Vedantists don't care for a post-mortem emancipation. We're not attracted to heaven. We want moksha, freedom. And we know that our soul is free at all times, so this is what we aspire for, even in life here, is to be free in life. And then he'd give you that ultimate word that's, again, not found anywhere else, Jivan Mukta. I don't know how many times he would say that to us. Depending on what track he was on in any given discourse, he would say, you Westerners haven't produced a Jivan Mukta yet. You've produced some intellectual giants, some great poets, just like Greece and Rome did. Where's the Jivan Mukta? Where's the living liberated soul? You can't judge a living liberated soul by playing good music, painting good paintings, or sculptures, or being a great military giant or a political giant. All of these are happening in the realm of the three gunas. And they're trying to create for you an affluent society, science and so forth, which is a big pipe dream. It's never lasted in any society. So he'd say, be careful, Americans, 2 world wars are past and the third one's on the horizon. And when he's talking about this, he's not talking reform, he's talking about realization. Not reform, realization. And not some sort of superficial happiness, some spiritual practice called sadhana. So I put this protective net of sadhana right there at higher sattva. Here's tamas, here's rajas, here's sattva, or mixed sattva, which we looked at here, and we can look at it after the break a little deeper, but here's pure sattva. Shankar says, what does it consist of, or what does it look like for a person to have transcended the 3 gunas, yet not quite realized Brahman? He's not yet a Jivan Mukta. He's reached pure sattva. What does it look like? And why is that the protective net against Maya? Vishuddham, it is pure. So the guna itself has become pure. It's not mixed. Mumuksha, useful for liberation. Yatyatma bimbaha, it reflects the Atman. And bhati, it emanates light. Asta bhati priya is like saying Sat Chit Ananda. So bhati is this light, which is not light shined by the light of the moon, or the light of the sun, or the light of lightnings, or candles, or fireflies, or any other light. Those are all distant glares. It shines by its own light. It's Svayam Jyoti, like a sun. Shines like a sun. That's one of the 6 proofs of truth. He shines like a sun. So one way you can point to something that's true is by this inference, it's called. So what is it really then he's talking about? It's the power of liberation as compared to the power of revelation. See? So that's the difference between sattva, which I've colored yellow, and pure sattva, which we've colored white. And there are probably shades of off-white and vanilla and so forth in between these two as people rise and fall in and out of them. So why is it the protective net of sadhana? Because people here in Revelation, they have glimpses of higher reality, but they don't practice sadhana. Or they practice too little of it. They must become practitioners. They must study snow conditions. They must store up drops in the Dharma bucket, is how Lord Buddha put it. And the bucket has to be free of holes. Sri Ramakrishna said the mind-body mechanism is sort of like a jar, a clay jar that you store honey in. But you look close at the jar and the honey's seeking out these little cracks in this old jar. And pretty soon it forms a puddle at the base of the jar. So he says, you haven't shored up your body-mind mechanism to keep it free from leakage of your prana, your pure intelligence, and your pure intention to become a jivan mukta in this lifetime, to get free. There's some leakage somewhere going on. See? Nuclear waste, as far as tamas and rajas goes. Your nuclear power plant is, leaking. Because much more powerful than nuclear power is Shakti. You want to keep her in. and keep that vibration, your thoughts of her pure and high. So if we go on, we'll pass our opportunity to take a break and maybe go too far into the second half. We'll come back and just venture below the net of sadhana, protection, to see where many of us have been or sometimes still frequent these lower climbs of sattva, rajas, and tamas, as we try and find a doorway or a portal into non-dual reality. So here, then, let's take our break in the study of the gunas in correlation with the subject, rebirth, reincarnation, and the illusion of death.